Hi, this is Joe again with another review. For the sake of this video, I'm going to be discussing the 2022. This is actually something reviewing that came out this year. The 2022 Ken Burns documentary, Benjamin Franklin. Of course, this was a 4-hour documentary that aired on PBS. And I happened to watch it over finally got around to watching it over the weekend. And so I'm doing a review for the sake of this video. And I'm sorry that it's been about a month since I've done a review. Because first of all, I've been pretty busy, and second of all, I really didn't have anything to review. And it took me a month to get to the Benjamin Franklin documentary, which, like I said, was produced and directed by Ken Burns. And my first reaction to this documentary was, I couldn't believe that Ken Burns actually did a documentary on a white person. And actually, don't want to make it. I don't want to make this to a racial thing. But Ken Burns has a habit of, even though he's white, he's whiter than I am, and he has made documentary after documentary after documentary, and he makes his narrators for his films. In this case, it's Peter Coyote, the actor, was in E.T., Aaron Brockovich, and a whole bunch of other movies. And I also narrated a whole bunch of documentaries for Ken Burns as well. Most recently, the Roosevelts and other series that Ken Burns has made. But I'm very surprised to see Ken Burns doing a documentary on a white person, because most recently he did a documentary with his daughter, or one of his daughters, about the Central Park Five, and of course he made comments about how racist whites were. There was racist cops, racist DA, that was fight with this, and I know I'm comparing that film with this film, but for Ken Burns to make that type of documentary about bashing whites, and in this film, in this documentary, he's actually did documentary on a white person. And of course, the next film is going to do is about the Holocaust. So, oh my God, it's doing an actual documentary on the Holocaust, which is hard to believe. For him to do something that pro-Jewish or something about the Holocaust, considering the fact that he hates white people. So which I'm very surprised, and hopefully when that documentary is about the United States and the Holocaust, which will be in the fall of 2022. Hopefully, we'll see it and hopefully do a review of it at the time comes. But for the sake of this video, we're going to be discussing the documentary on Ken Burns' documentary on Benjamin Franklin, which I was very surprised. I actually kind of liked it. For first of all, it was short. And like I said, it was short. It's only about a 4-hour documentary, not the 12, 13, 14, or 20-hour documentary that his previous documentaries were, like with country music and the World War II, the war, and all that other stuff. And Ken Burns does go in rather quickly in my some of the old stories about Benjamin Franklin, about when he was born, how he was raised, and he didn't have all that much believe it or not, he did not have all that much formal education. He only went to the equivalent today of maybe the 2nd or 3rd grade. Because his father made him go out to work. I mean, that's all he felt. Benjamin Franklin's father felt that's all he needed to learn. So he went into printing, which kind of like through osmosis. My father was a printer for 40 years, so kind of thought that was interesting. Because knew that Benjamin Franklin was a printer for a while. He printed his own newspaper, and he was the Rupert Murdoch of his time. He was printing up all kinds of different newspapers and stuff. So, which that's how. Then of course he was interested in electricity. And he thought that lightning was, you could harness electricity from lightning. And he proved that. Even though there were other scientists who were working on the same same types of theories, but Benjamin Franklin was the one who got, I guess, more notoriety over it, and discussed that. All flying the kite with the key on it. And of course, when he discussed about that, of course, how he got into the political world, because he felt that we should do more with the colonies, because don't forget there was no United States yet. There was lots of colonies. And we were all the 13 colonies for England in those days. And how he ends up being anti-England, right? Anti-British. Because the British was, with the Stamp Tax and Stamp Act and Patrick Henry said no taxation, no representation, and all that stuff. So Benjamin Franklin, because he spent so much time in England, and then of course later on in his life he spent a lot of time in France as the ambassador to France. He didn't know exactly what was going on in the United States until when he finally got home to Philadelphia to his wife and kids. Then he realized what was going on and why there was such an uproar in England, what's going on in the colonies. And of course, information was slow getting back and forth to England, because there was no telephones back then. There was no computers. There was no internet, obviously. We had none of that. Right? There was no telephones. There wasn't even a telegraph system in that time, saying by Morse code. There was none of that. It existed. It didn't exist maybe 100 years later. So it really shows you how much technology has changed since the 1700s to now in the 21st century that we're in now. How much technology has changed. So Benjamin Franklin didn't know anything what was going on in the colonies until he got back to his home in Philadelphia, and then he knew what was going on. He knew why the colonists were having were in such an uproar, and with all the taxes and all the fees is going on, and all the people going to jail and stuff, and so Benjamin Franklin decided, hey, now we understand what's going on, and now he decides to help out the colonists and help in the revolution, what eventually will become the Revolutionary War. And his son, his eldest son, was what they call a loyalist. He was very loyal to England and King George III, because King George III gave Benjamin Franklin's son, William, be the governor of New Jersey, of the colonial governor of New Jersey. So he decides to stay loyal with with England, and he really hated his father because Benjamin Franklin decided to become a colonial or a patriot, helping the colonials, fight against England, and William Franklin considered his father Benjamin Franklin a traitor. So and they didn't speak to each other for like years because of the political difference. It's kind of like what happens today. When people who are pro-Trump and the anti-Trumpers, and families don't speak to each other for like 6 years, for 6 to 7 years now, because people hated Trump because of what Trump stood for and how he expressed himself and all that type of thing. So you have all this stuff going on, all that stuff going on between Benjamin Franklin and his son. And on top of that, when Benjamin Franklin was first in England and then in France, his wife suffered 2 strokes and within 5 years, had 2 strokes in 5 years, and tragically died after 6 days after she had the second stroke. And Benjamin Franklin didn't go to his wife's funeral. It was in Europe. And at the time his wife was sick the second time and died, he was in Europe. He was practically in Europe the whole time, and so his family hated him because he was so busy being a big shot, or what we say today, a political big shot, that he wasn't even home. He didn't even go home for his wife's funeral or to mourn his wife. Yeah, so you had that controversy as well, in his life. So you have all this interesting stuff that actually happens, and then of course when he eventually he got sick and he was there for the Declaration of Independence, the first Continental Congress. Even though he was sick, he was he wasn't mobile anymore because he was getting older. I think it was in his late 70s or early 80s at that point. And at that time, usually people who are that age are usually, like Casey Stengel once said, all the people my age are dead at the present time. And that's what Benjamin Franklin was doing. He was not mobile anymore because of his age, and his legs were going out and couldn't walk much anymore. He had to be carrying them out, literally. And he eventually got even sicker and eventually died back in 1790. But he was able to see, the re-elected the first president, which was George Washington, and he was much, much older than everybody else, because most people at that time, especially like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, they were all in their 30s during the time of the American Revolution, and Benjamin Franklin was like it was like almost 70 years old. It was like 69, 70 when the Revolutionary War started, and it was really interesting to see his life transpire over a 4-hour documentary, which I said earlier at the beginning of this documentary that's very surprising that you have like just a 4-hour documentary. Well, it wasn't even 4 hours. It was less than that. More like 3 hours and 45 minutes or thereabouts. Without the interruptions total. And I was very surprised how short it was. I thought it was, at least 3 hours and 55 minutes, for both, or 2 hours and 55, or an hour and 55 minutes in both parts, and it wasn't that. I was like one part, the first part was like an hour and 45 minutes, which I was surprised it was that short, and the other part was like an hour and 55 minutes, the second part. So it's, quite short for both parts of the series, and it's, it is an enjoyable series. It is quick, and I also should point this out: the Ken Burns does refer Benjamin Franklin as a racist, which I mentioned at the top. It's a surprise that he didn't call Benjamin Franklin a white supremacist. He called Benjamin Franklin everything but a white supremacist, because he did have a couple of at the time called house slaves or house servants, just to help out. It's like what people use Mexicans for today, or American business people, to mow the lawns and to clean the toilets. Today, that's what Benjamin Franklin used. A couple of hired slaves or colored servants to help out with his print shop and to help out with the house. But he didn't have, let's say, 3,000 slaves on a plantation, because Benjamin Franklin didn't have a plantation. He just had a newspaper business. So he hired slaves, black slaves, or hired some black slaves to help out with the print shop, or his newspaper business, or his newspapers. That's all he had. And he actually did. I don't know if he actually paid them. Pay him a salary. That I'm not too sure of. And Ken Burns didn't make that point clear, if he gave them an actual salary or not. But you say today you pay them under the table. That Ken Burns didn't really make clear. But he did make the fact that he had a couple of slaves who helped working out in the the newspaper. But he just helped him printing up this newspaper, because printing a newspaper, especially in those days, is not a one-person operation. You need multiple people to work a newspaper. Now too, but that's now because computers help everything out. Now, by that time, he didn't have computers, like I said. So he helped. He hired. He hired just enough slaves to just work the newspaper, or maybe a couple of slaves to maybe clean his house and to maintain his house and to cook food and stuff. But that's it. He didn't have, let's say, hundreds of slaves like the plantations, like you see in Gone with the Wind, or in many series like North and South and stuff. But I don't get on tangent, but he did call Ken Burns did call Benjamin Franklin a racist because of how he treat blacks, how he treat American Indians. But over the course of it's kind of like Archie Bunker in a little way, but he's not as ignorant. Benjamin Franklin was not as ignorant as Archie Bunker was. You saw on television, but over and of course, if anybody watched All in the Family and Archie Bunker's place, Archie eventually changes his position on race relations. He still says some ignorant things, when he ended the Archie Bunker's place. He still says some ignorant things, but he kind of changes his attitude a little bit towards the end of not only All in the original All in the Family series, but also Archie Bunker's place. Same thing with Benjamin Franklin. He eventually changes his attitude, his racial attitudes towards blacks and towards Indians, even though he said a lot of stupid things towards them. But he respected what they were as people, as human beings and stuff. But just being just trying to be fair, trying to say that because Ken Burns, like the woke mob today, trying to say that all the people back then were all racist and stuff. You have to understand that that's how they were brought up. Okay, they were brought up to hate blacks, or they hate Indians, American Indians, and all that. They were born to hate them, or they were born to hate, but they were taught to hate them. And that's the crux of the whole thing as well. It's like in the song South Pacific, you gotta be carefully taught, and they weren't carefully taught. Benjamin Franklin was, but he was able to change his attitudes in a way to respect blacks, to respect the Indians and stuff, and other groups. He was able to respect them, even though he didn't like that other white groups like Germans and the Irish were coming into Philadelphia. He didn't like them, but he learned over the course of his life to respect them and respect them who they were. And kind of like I said, compared like Archie Bunker, he eventually learned to respect them. Because he realized he had to get along with them, and to cut down the racial epithets and stuff. He learned to accept them, even though he still has those racial beliefs. But he learned to respect some of them. They became friendly with in some cases. But as a series, I thought it wasn't a bad series, even though Ken Burns as usual overplayed the racial angle, which I don't like. I'm tired of Ken Burns playing the race card in his documentaries. But it's not a bad, especially if, it's about time that Ken Burns did a documentary on one of the founding fathers of the United States. It's about time he did a documentary on them, or at least one of them. I wish he would do more. I think he might have done one for Thomas Jefferson as well. I think I missed it. I think he missed the one he did with Thomas Jefferson. But I wish he did more on some of the founding fathers and maybe cut down on the racial stuff. I would like this documentary more if it cut down the racial stuff. But that's my review. I know it's long video. It's past 19 minutes now. But that's my review of the Ken Burns documentary, Benjamin Franklin. Please click on the video. Please rate it. Please subscribe to my channel. Please forward this video on your Facebook pages. And check out all my reviews and on my YouTube channel at RowdyC.com. So WDY and C.com. It's the homepage to Rowdy Review of Chris Lee Moore. And please check out all of his videos on his website. Thanks for watching, and catch you next time.